Oversea Understone by Susan Cooper, Chapter 9. Barney, left behind, flattened his nose against the window of Jane's bedroom. He saw Simon and Jane glance up and wave, but Great-Uncle Mary was marching along without looking to right or left, a tall, thin figure vanishing into the dark. Barney smiled to himself. He knew that determined stride very well. He peered after them until he could see nothing in the darkness but the lights of the village dancing in the black, rippled water among the ghostly boats. From the Withers' yacht there was no light at all. He turned away from the window, sighing a little at the frustration of being left out. To comfort himself, he took a firmer hold of the telescope case which Simon had solemnly handed over to him when they came up to say goodbye. At once he felt better. He was a knight entrusted with a sacred mission. He had been wounded in battle, but had to guard his secret just the same. He bent each leg gently in turn and winced at the burning tightness of the skin over his knees. The enemy were all round, hunting the secret which he held to his charge, but none of them would be able to get near. "Now then, Baccy, come to bed," Mrs. Polk said behind him unexpectedly. Barney swung round. She was standing massive in the doorway, with the light from the landing streaming round her, watching him. Barney's fingers instinctively curled tighter around the cool metal case, and he came toward her, patting softly on his bare feet. Mrs. Polk backed out to the landing and let him through the door. As he passed close to her, she reached out her hand curiously. "What's that he got there?" Barney jerked the case out of her reach, and then quickly forced a laugh. "Oh," he said, "it's a telescope of the captain's I borrowed. It's jolly good. You can see all the ships going past out in the bay. I thought I might be able to watch the others go down the harbour with it, but it's not much good in the dark." "Oh, ah?" Mrs. Polk seemed to lose interest. "Fancy that. I never seen the captain using any telescope. Still, there be all sorts of strange things in this house. More than I shall ever know about, I'll be bound. Well, good night, Mrs. Polk," Barney said, making for his own room. "Good night, me dear," Mrs. Polk said. "Just give me a shout if you want anything. I reckon I'll be going to bed myself soon. My days of waiting up for fishermen are over." She disappeared downstairs, and the landing lights went out. Barney switched on the lamp at the side of his bed and quietly closed the door. He felt unprotected and rather excited still, without Great-Uncle Mary in the house. He thought of pushing a chair against the door, but changed his mind when he remembered that Simon would fall over it when he came back. The last thing he wanted was for anyone to think he had been worried at being alone. He took the manuscript out to have one last look and to guess what Simon and Jane might find from the shadow of the standing stone. But he could see nothing in the rough picture of the stones and the moon. Suddenly sleepy, he slipped the roll back and turned out the light, snuggled down into the bedclothes with the case clutched to his chest, and fell asleep. He never knew exactly what it was that woke him. When, through the confusion of half-dreams and imagined noises, he realized that he was awake, the room was quite dark. There was no sound but the constant murmur of the sea, very faint on this side of the house, but always in the air. But from the way his senses were straining to catch something, he knew that a part of him which had not quite gone to sleep at all was warning him of some danger very near. He lay very still, but he could hear nothing. There was only a very faint creak behind him from the direction of the door. Barney felt his heart begin to thump a little faster. He was used to hearing noises at night. Their flat in London was part of a very old house which creaked and muttered all the time at night, as if the walls and floors were breathing. Although he had never been awake here long enough to find out, he guessed that the grey house probably did the same, but this noise, somehow, was not as friendly as those. Barney did what he did at home whenever he woke up and heard a noise that sounded more like a burglar than an ordinary creak in the floor. He made the small, grumbling, yawning whimper that people give sometimes in their sleep, and turned over in bed as if he were settling himself down without waking up. As he turned, he half opened one eye for a quick look round the room. At home when he did this, there was never anything to see at all, and he fell asleep again, feeling rather foolish, but this time it was different. By a faint line of light he could see that the door was standing open, and near it the glow of a small torch was moving across the room. The light of the torch stopped quite still as he moved. Barney snuggled into his new position and lay still and breathed deeply for several minutes with his eyes closed. Gradually he heard the small noises begin again. He lay listening, more perplexed and frightened now. Who was it? What were they doing? It can't be someone who wants to knock me on the head, he said to himself, or they'd have knocked me on the head before this. They don't want to wake me up. and they don't want to make a noise. They're looking for something. He groped under the bed, careful not to show any movement or make a noise. The telescope case was still there, and he kept tight hold of it. Then he heard another sound, the person moving noiselessly about the room. In the dark, sniffed very slightly. The noise was almost imperceptible, but Barney recognized it as a sniff he had heard before. He grinned to himself in relief, feeling his muscles relax. Very slowly he edged his hand out from under the bedclothes toward the bedside table and switched on the light. Mrs. Polk jumped, dropped her torch with a clatter, and clamped her hand to her heart. For some seconds Barney was completely dazzled by the sudden light flooding into the room, but he blinked his eyes clear in time to see disappointment and surprise on her face. Quickly she pulled herself together and gave a broad, reassuring smile. "There now, and I thought I hadn't waked ye up. What a pity. I'm so sorry, my dear. Did I frighten ye?" Barney said bluntly. "Whatever are you doing, Mrs. Polk?" "Came to see if he was all right and sleeping properly, and I thought while I was up here I'd pick up your dirty cap to wash with the rest of the things downstairs. Had your Horlicks up here, remember? Bless the boy," she added fondly. "He's half asleep still." Barney stared at her. He did feel sleepy, but not too sleepy to remember Jane coming into his room when he had first gone to bed and saying, "Mrs. Polk said would I pick your cap up if you'd..." Oh, his cup, okay. "Mrs. Polk said I would pick up your cup. Would I pick up your cup if you'd finished, or do you want any more?" "Jane took my cup down." Mrs. Polk looked vaguely round the room and gazed wide-eyed at the empty bedside table. "So she did then. It quite slipped my mind. What a silly thing I be. Well, I'll leave ye to go back to sleep, my love. And I'm so sorry to have waked ye." She bustled with almost comical speed out of the room. Barney had almost fallen asleep when he heard low voices outside the door, and Simon came in. He shot up in bed. "What happened? Did you find anything? Where did you go?" Nothing happened much," said Simon wearily. He peeled off the windbreaker and sweater and dropped them on the floor. "We found where we've got to go next, where the next clue leads. It's those rocks at the end of Kamar Head, right over the sea." "Did you go and look? Is there anything there?" "No, we didn't." Simon was abrupt, trying not to remember the nastiness of the moments when he and Jane had been alone in the dark. "Why not?" "The enemy was up there, that's why, all round us in the dark, and one of them was the man who chased me that day with the boy. Only Jane says it was the vicar. I don't know. It's all awfully complicated. Anyway, we ran away and nobody followed us. Funny, they all seemed scared of Gummery." "Who were they?" "Dunno." Simon yawned hugely. "Look, I'm going down to have some cocoa. We can talk in the morning." Barney lay down again, sighing. "All right. Oh!" he jerked again. "Wait a minute. Shut the door." Simon looked at him curiously and pushed the door shut. "What isn't?" "You mustn't say anything in front of Mrs. Polk. Not a word. Tell Jane." "We shouldn't. She wouldn't understand anyway." "Ho!" Barney said importantly. "That's what you think. I woke up just now and she was snooping around the room in the dark with a torch. Good job I had the map all safe. She's after it. I bet you she's after it. I think she's bad." Simon said skeptically, looking at him. Barney's hair was ruffled, and his eyes shadowed with sleep. It was very easy to believe that what he was describing had been no more than a dream. When they went downstairs in the morning, Mrs. Polk was bustling energetically about the kitchen, beating eggs in a bowl with her elbow flicking up and down like a machine. "Breakfast?" she said brightly. Barney watched her closely, but he could see nothing but good humor and beaming honesty. "And yet," he said insistently to himself, "she looked so guilty when I turned on the light." "It's a wonderful day out," Jane said happily as they sat down. "The wind's still quite strong, but there isn't a cloud anywhere. It must have blown them all away." "Ah, well, let's hope it doesn't blow the marquee away as well," Mrs. Polk said, putting an enormous jug of creamy yellow milk on the table. "What marquee?" "What?" Mrs. Polk opened her eyes. "Haven't you seen the posters? Why, it is Carnival Day today. People come from all round, even from St. Austell. All sorts of things go on. There's a swimming gala in the harbour, and the band comes out, and there's dancing all the way up the street from the sea. They play the floral dance. You know the tune, surely?" She began to sing lustily. "I know it," Simon said, "but I thought they only danced it somewhere else." "Helston," said Jane, "the Helston Fury dance." So they do, Mrs. Polk said. I reckon they copied it from us myself. Everyone knows Truisk's floral dance. It was danced in my grandmother's time. Everyone dressed gay and fancy in costume, and there's a great crowd in the street all dancing and laughing. No one goes out fishing today. There's a great marquee in the field beyond the village, and all kinds of stalls and games and wrestling. And then, when the sun begins to go down, they crown the carnival queen, and they stay round the harbour long after it gets dark and dance in the moonlight. 'Tis a long time before anyone wants to go to sleep in Truisk at Carnival Day. What fun, Jane said. Said Simon. Oh, you mustn't miss it, Mrs. Polk said earnestly. I shall be there every minute. 'Tis like the old days all over again, eh? But now, here I stand, talking, and your scrambled eggs will be getting hard on the stove. She turned and sailed out of the room. It does sound fun, Jane said reproachfully to Simon. I dare say we've got other things to do, of course, if you'd rather go to the carnival than find the Grail. Shh! Barney looked nervously at the door. Oh, don't worry about her. She's all right. Great Uncle Mary's a long time coming down, isn't he? I didn't mean it, Jane said meekly. Actually, what I want to do more than anything is to get back up to the headland so we can go and find that rock. We can't go without Gummery. I wonder if he's awake. I'll go see. Barney slipped from his chair. Hey, where be off to? Mrs. Polk nearly collided with him, carrying her tray through the door. Sit down and eat this now, while it is hot. I was going to call Great Uncle Mary. Now you leave him be, poor old gentleman, Mrs. Polk said firmly. Gadding about in the middle of the night. Tidn't natural at his age. No wonder he's having a good long sleep. Night fishing, indeed, and not a fish to show for it after all that traipsing about. You proper wearied him last night, I reckon. You remember we aren't all as young as you three. She wagged her finger at them. Now you get along into the sun after your breakfast, and let him have his sleep out. She departed again, shutting the door behind her. Oh dear, Jane said abashed. She's right, you know. Great Uncle Mary is quite old, really. Well, he's not doddering, Simon said defensively. He doesn't seem old at all sometimes. He went like a rocket last night, Aunt carrying you. It was all I could do to keep up with him. Well, perhaps this is the after effect. Jane's conscience was beginning to nag. Last night must have been an awful strain on him. What with one thing and another, I don't think we should wake him up. It's only 9 o'clock after all. But we haven't made any plans or anything, said Barney. Perhaps we just ought to wait here till he does wake up, Simon said despondently. Oh, no, why should we? He wouldn't mind if we went up to the headland. He can follow us when he's had his sleep. Didn't he say we shouldn't go anywhere without him from now on? Barney said doubtfully. Or anyway, not without telling him? Well, we can leave a message with Mrs. Polk. No, we can't. Barney thinks Mrs. Polk is one of the enemy, said Simon skeptically. Oh, surely not, Jane said vaguely. But anyway, we don't really have to leave a message. He's bound to guess where we've gone. There's only one place any of us would want to go, and that's to the rocks on Camar Head. We can say to Mrs. Polk that he'll know where we've gone, just like that, and then she'll tell him and he'll understand. We can say we've taken Rufus for a walk, said Barney hopefully. That's not a bad idea. Where is he? In the kitchen. I'll go and get him. Tell Mrs. Polk we are there, and tell her we'll see her at her beloved carnival. We probably will anyway. Barney bolted the last of his scrambled eggs and went out to the kitchen, munching a piece of toast. Simon suddenly had an idea. He got up and crossed to the window and peered out down the hill. He turned back quickly to Jane. We might have known. They're watching us already. That boy's at the bottom of the road, sitting on the wall, not doing anything, just sitting there, looking up here. They must be waiting for us to come out, because they don't know whether we found a clue last night that will lead us somewhere. And there we will pause.